everyone, this is Dr. Durga from the Department of Oral Medicine and Radiology. I have 4 years of academic experience and 10 national and 4 international publications to my credit. And the topic for today's discussion is Principles of Radiographic Interpretation. So there are two basic terms which are used to describe the black and white areas which are seen on a dental radiograph, namely radiolucent and radioopaque. Radiolucency refers to that portion of a process radiograph that appears dark or black. A structure that appears radiolucent on a radiograph lacks a density and it permits a passage of X-rays with little or no resistance, for example, airspace and pulp tissue. So radioopacity refers to that portion of a process radiograph that is light or white. Radioopaque structures are dense and they absorb or resist the passage of X-ray beam, for example, enamel, dentin and bone. So there is a diagnostic process. There are two main forms of diagnostic processing described in radiology, namely the analytical or the systematic strategy and the non-analytical strategy. In the analytical strategy, there is a step-by-step analysis of all the imaging features of an abnormal finding. This will help in reducing the bias and the premature closure of the decision making. And in case of non-analytical strategy, the clinician makes an automatic decision regarding the diagnosis without thorough analysis of the image. This is purely based on the recognition of pattern. So when you have a radiographic case, you can do either an analytical or a non-analytical strategy. Under analytical strategy, you examine the features of the lesion. For example, the location, the size and shape, the borders, the internal architecture or the internal structure and the effect of the lesion on the surrounding structures. Then you come to a conclusion whether it is normal or abnormal, acquired or developmental, and you classify the disease. Then you formulate the final interpretation. This is the algorithm for diagnosis. So the image analysis algorithm, whether it is abnormal or normal. Abnormal can be classified again into acquired and developmental. So under acquired, the lesion could be a cyst, a tumor, a benign neoplasm, a malignant neoplasm, can be due to bone dysplasias, metabolic disorders, inflammatory, vascular, or can be due to trauma. These are the steps in radiographic interpretation: the localization of abnormality, assessment of the periphery and shape, analyzing the internal structure or the internal architecture of the bone, analyzing the effect of the lesion on the surrounding structures, and finally formulating the interpretation. So I'll be explaining about the steps in detail in the upcoming slides. So the first is the localization of abnormality. See whether it is generalized or localized. Generalized can be due to some metabolic or endocrine abnormalities of bone, and localized can be unilateral or bilateral. Unilateral is most likely to be a pathology, and bilateral it can be due to variation of normal structures. And when it is single, it can be a cyst, it can be a tumor, and when it is multifocal, you have to think about multiple myeloma, periapical cement osseous dysplasia and other metastatic lesions. Next, you look for the position of the lesion in the jaws, whether it is within the jaws, that is within the maxilla or the mandible, or in the soft tissue. The next one is the epicenter of the lesion, which is very important, which tells you about where the lesion arises from. So when it is coronal to the tooth, the lesion probably is composed of odontogenic epithelium. When it is above the inferior alveolar canal, it is likely to be of odontogenic origin, and when it is below the canal, it is unlikely to be of odontogenic origin. And when it is within the inferior alveolar canal, it is probably neural or vascular in origin. And condylar region could be probably cartilaginous lesions, or it can be lesions like osteochondroma. Within the maxillary antrum is not of odontogenic origin. And in cases of central giant cell granuloma, the epicenter is anterior to the first molar in case of mandible, and it is anterior to the cuspid in case of maxilla, and this central giant cell granuloma is mainly seen in young patients. And periapical osseous dysplasia, this is especially seen in the periapical region of the teeth. Next comes the assessment of periphery. Encapsulated benign neoplasms and many cysts have well-defined borders as they grow at a moderate pace. Infected lesions and malignancies show ill-defined borders because they are reflecting their aggressive growth. The periphery can also have a dimension or a zone of transition. The zone of transition can be divided into narrow and wide. In case of narrow, it appears as a thin radioopaque line or cortex at the periphery, and wider zone, it gives a thick sclerotic border. So we have two types of borders, that is well-defined borders and ill-defined borders. Well-defined borders can again be classified into punched out, corticated, sclerotic, and may have a soft tissue capsule. So the punched out lesions, they have a sharp boundary, there is no cartication, no or very narrow zone of transition, for example, multiple myeloma. So in the corresponding picture, you can see the small punched out radiolucencies on the skull radiograph, and this is a case of multiple myeloma. And the corticated borders, this is radio opaque, thin and fairly uniform, seen in cyst and benign tumors. Sclerotic margin has a wider zone of transition, thick radio opaque, and it is not uniform, mainly seen in periapical osseous dysplasias and condensing osteitis. And soft tissue capsule, this is a radiolucent line around a radio opaque lesion. This is very characteristic of benign cementoblastoma. And in the corresponding picture, you can see the lesion, a mixed radiolucent and radio opaque lesion, which is surrounded by a thin radiolucent capsule, which indicates a soft tissue capsule. Next is the poorly defined borders. We have blunting and invasive borders. The blunting border has a wider zone of transition. There is a gradual change of the abnormal trabeculae of the lesion into the normal trabeculae of the adjacent bone. This is seen in sclerosing osteitis and fibrous dysplasia. And in case of invasive or permeative borders, we have a wider zone of transition. There is an area of radiolucency with scanty trabeculae just behind the leading edge. And this is seen in cases of malignancies which has a rapid growth. Next is the shape. It can be circular or fluid fill, for example, any cyst. And scallop, there is a series of arcs or semicircles reflecting the mechanism of growth. And this scalloped margin or a scalloped shape is characteristic of odontogenic keratocyst and simple bone cyst. The next step is to analyze the internal structure. The internal structure can be radiolucent, radio opaque, or of mixed density. That is, it has both radiolucent and radio opaque components. Radiolucency is due to the absence of bone type, which is normal for that site, and radio opacity can be due to abnormal mineralized tissue, which is laid down by the abnormal cells. Thickened trabeculae, as seen in cases of osteosclerosis, can be dystrophic calcification or anatomic variance, for example, mineralized stylohyoid ligament. And mixed is due to the deposition of mineralized tissue in an area when the normal bone has been previously removed, for example, in cases of ossifying fibroma. Next is the internal septations. The presence of septa, which is the residual bone, may divide the internal structure into compartments. That's why the lesion gets a multilocular appearance. So curved coarse septa gives you a soap bubble appearance, as seen in cases of ameloblastoma and KCOTs, and wispy granular septa is seen in central giant cell granuloma. Small striate septa gives a tennis racket appearance, which is characteristic of odontogenic myxoma. So these pictures will depict what I said before. So first is the honeycomb appearance, the second picture shows the soap bubble appearance, third one is the tennis racket appearance, and fourth is the scallop. The difference between the honeycomb and soap bubble is that the honeycomb appearance, the locules appears to be smaller and uniform, but in case of soap bubble, the locules will be large and non-uniform, which is characteristic of ameloblastoma. The next one is the amorphous bone. This appears to be homogeneous, dense, amorphous structure which are organized into round oval shapes. And the tooth structure, which is organized into enamel, dentin and pulp chambers. The internal density of such structures are equivalent to the density of the tooth, for example, odonto. We are moving on to the next step, analyzing the effects of the lesion on the surrounding structures. The first one is the displacement of teeth. Slow growing space occupying lesions causes the displacement of teeth. When the lesions above the crown of the tooth, they displace the teeth apically, example dentigerous cyst, and when the lesion is within the ramus, it displaces the teeth anteriorly, as seen in cherubism, and lesions from the papilla of a developing tooth displaces the teeth coronally, as seen in cases of leukemia and lymphomas. Root resorption, it is seen in chronic or slow growing lesions. This can be of three types: knife-edged, which is seen in ameloblastoma, multiplanar, seen in central giant cell granulomas, and spiked resorption, which are seen in sarcomas. The corresponding pictures depict the same. The next one is the widening of periodontal ligament space. It can be uniform or irregular, and lamina dura may be present or absent. Sometimes it is uniform widening without loss of lamina dura, which is seen in orthodontic tooth movement. And irregular widening with loss of lamina dura is seen in malignancies, and sometimes the widening of pedial space is generalized on both the sides. This is typically seen in scleroderma and it is referred to as a Staphnis sign, and when it is localized only on one side, it is seen in osteosarcoma, which is known as the characteristic Garrington sign. The next one is the inferior alveolar canal. When it is superiorly displaced, it is characteristic of fibrous dysplasia, and when there is inferior displacement of inferior alveolar canal, it is mostly of odontogenic neoplasms. When there is widening of the canal with intact borders, it can be due to neural or vascular lesions, and when there is irregular widening with cortical destruction, it is due to malignancies. Then comes the outer cortical bone. Bony expansion with an outer cortical plate is characteristic of slow growing lesions. So, this can be intact and visible as seen in ameloblastoma. The first picture shows an intact and visible cortical bone expansion. The second picture shows intact but fading cortical bone expansion, which is characteristic of ameloblastic fibroma, and the third one is perforated, seen in aneurysmal bone cyst or other odontogenic myxomas. Bony expansion without an outer cortical plate is seen in rapidly growing lesions like malignancies. Then is the periosteal reactions. It can be lamellar uninterrupted, seen in chronic osteomyelitis, lamellar interrupted, seen in osteosarcoma, onion skin appearance seen in Gary's osteomyelitis and Ewing sarcoma, and solid thick seen in osteoid osteoma, and buttress formation is characteristic of ameloblastoma. You can refer the picture which is given on the right side. So, now how to describe a radiographic lesion? There is a mnemonic for this: lesion, L-E-S-I-O-N. So, L stands for location, E is the edge, S is the shape, I the internal aspect, O is the other structures, and N is the number. This is how to describe a radiographic lesion. The first is the location. It is maxilla or mandible, anterior or posterior, localized or generalized, and unilateral or bilateral. And edge, see whether it is ill-defined or well-defined. Shape, see whether it is circular, ovoid, linear or scalloped. And internal aspect, whether it is radiolucent, radio-opaque or mixed. And effect on surrounding structures, look for the displacement of teeth, the inferior alveolar canal, and the expansion of the cortical bone. And number, see whether the lesion is single or multiple. So, we are moving on to the last part of the radiographic interpretation. Here comes writing a diagnostic imaging report. This should contain the general patient information like the name, age and sex of the patient, the imaging procedure, the technique along with the date of examination should be mentioned in the report. Then the clinical information should be brief and should summarize the information pertaining to the abnormality or the region of interest, and the findings. This is an objective detailed list of observation which are made from the diagnostic image or the images. And the final one is the interpretation. This is the collected observation from the images which allow the radiologist to elucidate their meaning. To conclude, the pathological conditions affecting the jaws are common yet not frequently imaged or encountered by the radiologist. Imaging findings may not lead to a specific diagnosis, but they should narrow the differential diagnosis and should guide further workup. Despite of variety, there exists a similarity in the image patterns which further makes the diagnosis very difficult, and so proper characterization of the jaw abnormalities is essential to ensure appropriate diagnosis. With this, I conclude my lecture on principles of radiographic interpretation. These are the references for further reading, and I'll see you on another interesting topic.